Good evening, everyone. This is Harsha Vikramasinghe, uh, President of the Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association, and a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us this evening.
And thank you very much, SLEMA, for giving the opportunity. And would like to see many members joining from different parts. And it's a warm welcome and the first experience we are having on an online presentation under SLEMA. Well, can I also recheck whether you can hear me? So sustainability is the development needs the present generation without jeopardizing. Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, Mr. NAMIZ.
Yeah.
Okay. The social aspects, environmental aspects, and economic aspects. The question is actually whether we are thinking about our needs or whether we are trying to fulfill our greed. So if we try to fulfill our greed, then we may not leave a planet for our future generation. Moving on to the next slide, we always hear about planet and to ensure prosperity and peace for every people, all the people. And unlike the triple bottom line of the private sector talks about the profit aspects, social aspects, and economical aspects, the SDGs interpret that in the form of people, planet, and prosperity. And also it emphasizes in order to maintain those three, we have to ensure partnership, working together, achieving synergy, and ensure peace among the people. So universality, that is applicable to all the people together, and integration, working together, and especially the transition aspect, moving from to the other is very important in the development goals arena. And it is a universal cause. We know that 17 goals are there, etc., etc. From our part, it's something like a guidance, which is not binding as a government or a country. When we move on to the Paris Accord, it is something like a binding we have in the form of nationally determined contributions, where the government has said we will do certain things for the betterment of the world. And we were having some sort of a readiness phase from 2017 to 19, and now we are in the implementation stage. We are moving on to action, taking action in order to protect the world, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as against the emissions we have done in the year 2010. So nationally determined contributions has elements of mitigation, climate change adaptation, loss and damage, addressing the losses and damages according to the Warsaw International Mechanism, and means of implementation in the form of capacity building, technology development, transfer, and financing. And from energy sector for us, that is important is as a country, as a government, we have committed. On to the next slide, which is on sustainable energy. Shamila, next one, please. Shamila, next slide and next slide. Shamila, hello. Hello. All right. Okay. So sustainable development is about, we explained about sustainable development. So when it comes to sustainable energy, can you please confirm whether you can hear me? Can you please confirm whether you can hear me?
NAMIZ, yes, I can.
Can you please confirm whether you can hear me?
Yes, we are fine.
Yes.
All right.
We can hear you.
on sustainable energy, the definition for sustainable energy. Yeah, you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, NAMIZ, yeah, you go ahead. Yeah.
You are very loud and clear. Go ahead.
So derived definition for sustainable energy is energy that meets the generation of the present without compromising future generation to meet their energy needs. And often we link renewable energy and energy efficiency aspects to sustainable energy. Renewable energy is generating something like more, unless we have some retiring coal or nuclear stations. Renewable energy is something like adding to the installed capacity. Energy efficiency refers to reducing waste. We look energy efficiency aspects. We look energy efficiency aspects from the perspective of output divided by input or input energy. For a unit input of energy, how much output we produce, and we try to increase. Energy conservation is something like saving, right? We give up some comfort from some use now, and we leave it for future use. That is energy conservation or Bala Shakti Sanrakshana. So we forego something. Energy storage is, while we use now, we use as it is, business as usual, we use them, but at the same time for future use, we reserve something else. So it is something like pump storage or battery storage, or even collecting some firewood for the rainy period. We collect now, but we reserve it for future. So that is the energy storage aspect. And finally, the energy humility aspect, which is Bala Shakti Nihata Maniswaya. That is some sort of a new word that we use, but it is not something new. Moving on to the next, the term humility has many synonyms. Being humble, modesty, self-regard, shyness, meekness, etc., etc. And on the diagram, the Chinese proverb talking about a bamboo being like a bamboo. Higher you grow, the deeper you bow, you bend down. So energy humility or humility is going beyond rhetoric. SLEMA talks about rational use of energy. So humility is rational choice of energy. So rhetoric is not like NATO. NATO is no action talk only. Rhetoric is, you can be impressive or persuasive, you can talk many things, but if you do not do, we are in trouble. So humility is not actually talking, but doing things or doing Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we
Mr.
can
Namiz,
hear.
we can hear you.
Okay. I'm really sorry about it. So moving on, humility. It's talking about going beyond rhetoric, right? So it emphasizes the actions of the people. And as SLEMA, we advocate rational uses of energy. So this is not only use the rational choice of energy as well. And it deals a lot with the values of the people, the attitude, the perceptions, beliefs, norms, ethics, etc. It deals with the aspiration, expectations of the people, what they expect, how they compare them, and something to do with mind, heart, soul, and of course, some degree of spiritual aspects. So humility is a skill, and at the same time, it's a state of mind. With curiosity, the people go for learning. It can be trained and taught. And then we can develop humility, we can improve. But most importantly, we should have an open mind and have our own ways of thinking, have our own value system. Moving on to the next, humility is not really the Alpage aspect that is depicted in the middle picture. It is not really giving up everything, because we generally talk about enhanced quality of life and standard of living. While maintaining standard of living, sustainability is leaving the future generations to live, leaving the resources for them to live. So it doesn't mean that we should give up everything. So it is not Alpage aspect, but leading sustainable lifestyles. So it is beyond existence, beyond subsistence, but leading a sustainable, happy living. So we have to go for rational use, go beyond, sort of not really crave behind wants, but talk about needs. Of course, for that, we have to collaborate, share, coordinate, etc. So it's simply, we should live at the same time letting the others to live. Moving on to the next slide, COVID has really brought up a lot of challenges to us. It's a worldwide shock, pandemic shock, intensifying the anxiety, stress, and pressure to the people, bringing in many changes, global lockdown, operations coming to a standstill, stopping everything. Supply chains relying more on local resources. That's where we can think of energy security and energy independence as a country. Tourism came to a halt, airlines came to a halt, sports, exhibitions, musical shows all got postponed or cancelled. But people, we have seen people stockpiling non-perishables. So when it comes to energy, it can be stocking energy as well to some extent. So moving on to the next slide, we also have seen a lot of jobs lost. So it's the worst economic downturn in the world since the Great Depression. Moving on to the next slide, which is on post-COVID context, after COVID context, how the responses are. The demand for fossil fuels came down. Not only the prices, but the demand came down because activities came down. Accordingly, the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions also came down. And we are sailing in the troubled waters because of economic turbulences, particularly in the macroeconomic aspects. The people have realized many things. They have adapted to the situation. And we have very clearly seen the people moving on to a sustainable consumption transition. And then real-time downsizing of the consumer economy. So when the economy goes down, and we have seen energy going ahead with, we have seen the relationship between use of energy and GDP, gross domestic product. So when the economy comes down, obviously the demand for energy can come down. And the social distancing aspect has emphasized the people to behave individually or individualized. That is going to change. That is going to be a challenge for the energy professionals as well. And then people are questioning about sharing, using things in public and sharing aspects, mainly because of social distancing. So what is in for, or what is the repercussions for us as energy people? Offices, factories being closed means demand less energy. Working from home means more energy. You may have seen it in your electricity bill. Even for us, we generally get a bill of less than 1,000 rupees a month. And this time the bill came for 4,000 rupees. So working from home, we have seen a lot of energy consumption at the home front, but overall energy has declined. As you can see in the right hand chart. Of course, they are from different countries. We have seen on a particular day during the peak hours as to how the energy consumption has reduced compared to a similar day in the previous year. Now, next slide also gives some indication to us about the power consumption as to how it had been declining from the weeks since the lockdown. So more weeks with the lockdown, we have seen a decline and then slight increase in certain countries. So the experience had been, had there been a full lockdown, 25% reduction in demand, partial lockdown, about 18% decline in demand. And at the bottom, we also see as to how the world oil prices came down. So moving on to the next slide, what are we to do? We are struggling to avert the COVID-19, the negative impacts. We have gone for we have gone away from face-to-face and having virtual platforms. And now we are having a virtual discussion. So a lot of things like this. And people were forced to go for online interfaces for business, education, health, and etc. And a lot of social media being used. And for energy professionals, this extended quarantine has brought in new consumer demands, different consumer demands. So that is something as professionals, we may have to analyze and see as to what will happen to the energy sector. Moving on to the next slide, getting into the history. The reality had been, whenever there had been a calamity, they have disrupted and transformed the social system. Disrupted and transformed to a different state. So society never the same as it had been existed before a calamity. We experienced tsunami, the calamity, and really things changed after that, with the assumption that life will never be the same. But at the same time, there are certain concerns, right? Because as Sri Lankans, we also hear that after a disaster, we quickly forget how the things used to be, and we get back to normal. And as people, there is a resistance to change. But as energy professionals, planners, etc., business as usual can go for polluting industries. So that is something we can think of, whether we are going back to the business as usual or not. Moving on to the next slide on rebound effect. Coming back to normalcy, the people can go for adopting to rebound effect. Rebound effect is, we use our consumption for some time for some reason, and then when we see the advantages, there is a tendency for us to use more and more. The typical example Mr. Senanayake used to give is, when we change our incandescent bulbs by LEDs or CFLs, people have seen reduction in energy bills. And after some time, having seen the reduced energy bills, the people went on fixing new energy consuming equipment, including air conditioners, and they have seen their overall energy consumption has increased. So that is the rebound effect. So even that can happen. We have reduced our consumption, but after this, because of the various vigorous promotions that would encourage us to revert to normal, and many inducements we may get, and then banks also may lower the interest rates. Even the central banks may help that. So those can encourage people to go for more consumption in the future. But for you and me, what we should capitalize is some tastes may replace what had been familiar. Certain things may replace. So that is a target area for us. Where we need a change, we should try to embark on the taste of the people that are beneficial for the future. So that is the message for us. So moving on to the next slide, which is on consumerism, that encourages people to buy a lot of products, manipulating the spending of the people. Of course, strategic management would harp on the competitive advantage of resource-based perspectives, because resources, whenever the resources are valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and non-substitutable, they get the competitive advantage. At the same time, mass production will lead for economies of scale, which means more products, like what happened in China. They go for large quantities and then we get cheaper products. And at the same time, certain companies, marketers go for planned obsolescence, which means they really don't want the life of a product to stay for more than 2-3 years. Because if they last for a long time, if the products are durable, people will not buy. So therefore, they force the people to make that product obsolete. and then advertising promotions, etc. They try to portray the people to display their status, not actually the functional aspect or utility aspects of goods and services. That's another thing that business people can say. And they know that the wealthy people are the best consumers, so that when they can influence them, when the wealthy people start buying, even the other people, the middle class and the low income people also will try to follow. That is where the trickle-down effects comes. And what we suggest is to change this rebound into refraction. Something like Vartanaya or Apagamanaya in Sinhala terms. We should direct in the right direction. So we are not going in the old ways, in the old same direction. We refract, we Vartanaya or Apagamanaya into the right direction, into the sustainable pathways, to a low resource intensive consumption patterns. And we reach prosperity, we develop ourselves without surpassing, without going beyond the planetary boundaries, without limiting the nature's limitations. We always talk about building back for the better, but at the same time, we should build for resilience. Some sort of ability of the people to withstand the shocks, including in the energy sector, leading for a sustainable world. And we should identify as the energy professionals the right directions, and then have the inertia, momentum, and speed towards the right direction. It's something like right first and first time right, some sort of a thing like that. And then we should try to increase the number of beneficiaries. Moving on to the next slide, the landscape we are expecting is something like what we see in the graph on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, the graph shows increase in energy for some time, and then there is a decrease in overall consumption, and large portion of renewables increasing in the energy mix. That needs a paradigm shift. So sustainable consumption can lead to that paradigm shift. Energy humility can lead to that. So we should go for a shift in energy mix towards sustainable energy, and the governments can come up with stimulus packages, and we should ramp up them towards sustainable energy. Because the governments may try to find short-term fixes to revive the GDP growth, because we have to give the jobs, have the industries, we have to collect the tax revenues. So the government will have to give some short-term answers to these problems. So we have to ensure that the sustainable development will not be undermined under the circumstances. So distributed energy may work in the future. The modular packages anyway has a demand coming up. And for you and me, what is going to happen as a result of oil prices? The drop or the dip in oil prices will give high competition for renewable energy. The government can resort to oil-based energy because the oil prices have come down, which can hamper the renewable energy or the sustainable energy aspect. But as a matter of fact, at the moment, in Southeast Asia, the oil market for energy sector is expected to be less than 2%. So that way we can be a little happy. Moving on to the next slide, that is how we can see a lot of jobs coming up if we go for a sustainable energy transition, about 1 million jobs by the year 2050. And moving on to the next, what sort of action we can take in order to curtail energy consumption. So humility and sustainable consumption, IDA is a marketing tool, drawing the attention of the people. We'll move on to the next slide, Chamila. IDA, we draw the attention of the people and enhance the interest in them, have a desire for them to buy things and take action. So marketers really do this with maybe high value products so that their markets are good and profits are good. That is something that we have to tackle. So we should go for an appetite for sustainable consumption rather than getting deceived from the marketing tools like IDA. So we should protect the consumers from misleading information and impulse buying. Just having a look, the people used to buy certain things. So that's something that we should avoid when we talk about the sustainable energy or energy humility aspects. Consumerism has to be avoided. Consciousness and conscience has to be increased. I'm very happy the Sustainable Energy Authority is really promoting energy consciousness starting from the students. And Mr. Senanayake used to say, the main solution we have is choice editing. Of course, we have many tools. Moving on to the next slides, what we have learned from, moving on to the next slide, what we have learned from what has happened in Sri Lanka in the energy sector, minimum energy performance standards or MEPS, which is an endorsement, yes, no, or binary, whether you go for it or not go for it, some sort of an immediate selection. And then we have different labeling aspects, star labels, where the people go for some sort of informed choice, where we can compare. 3 stars is better than no stars. 5 stars is better than 3 stars. Such sort of standards and labels. And also we can have SLA standards, whether they are voluntary or mandatory, which gives specifications, or Sustainable Energy Authority Act 2007 is very powerful, Act number 35. It can really impose regulations and get the things legalized. Moving on to the next slide. What are the examples in Sri Lanka? Of course, on the right side, we will see an open fridge. I don't think Sustainable Energy Authority endorses keeping the fridges open because of energy waste. But what is SLSA doing? They are coming with star labels for CFL bulbs, fans, refrigerators, and air conditioners. CFL bulbs really helped us with 400 megawatts, avoiding one whole power plant. And then they are coming with energy efficient building codes and smart home guides. Of course, they are planning to go for central AC, refrigerator replacements, motors, reactive power, etc. And mainly from the lower end aspect, the Shakti LED program, which is eliminating the inefficient incandescent lamps. So those are some of the examples from Sri Lanka. And some other aspects we can go for are the taxes and charges. The next slide under choice editing. The taxes and charges, what happens is they make the non-sustainable products expensive. Non-sustainable products are expensive, so that compared to that, sustainable products may be cheaper for the people to buy. But are we resorting to this? Because there are taxes in Sri Lanka for cars, for petroleum fuels, liquor, cigarettes, etc. They are taxed heavily, but at the same time, we are not very convinced that these have really reduced the demand for cars, petroleum, liquor, or cigarettes. Of course, hybrid cars, the tax concession really helped to move. That is something appreciated. So moving on to the next slide about the incentives and subsidies. They are something like the carrots. So these really reduce the prices of the sustainable goods. Earlier taxes will increase the non-sustainable products. So subsidies and incentives will reduce the price. So tax credits, reductions, rebates, etc., grants, donations. But the message for us as energy planners or people engaged in the energy sector is small subsidies don't really create demand. That had been the experience. And subsidies can be effective if the price gap between non-sustainable products and sustainable products can be breached. There is a very small, it's going to be effective. And if the systems are complicated to apply, and if the payoff time or payback period is very long, they are not going to be effective. Moving on to the next slide. We can promote these by communications and campaigns, awareness and education, advocacy and policies, lobbying for these, improving consciousness, and the promotion of like-minded groups like SLEMA or Sustainable Consumption and Production Forum. Like-minded people working together, promoting consciousness, education among themselves and spreading them in other things. And of course, people like us can scale up and have better outreach. And mind, the most important thing is legislation and resource allocations. We may have a lot of programs, unless there are budgetary allocations or legal compulsations for the people, certain communications and campaigns may not work. So whether we like it or not, legislation may be required. And at the same time, there should be budgetary allocation. Sustainable Energy Authority or the central budget or Ministry of Power and Energy budget or whatever, or environment budgets should have budgets allocated for these type of things. Moving on to the next, they are about voluntary labeling. We have heard about voluntary labeling like Energy Stars, Fair Trade, then some other examples, Strike Rainforest Alliance, Nordic Swan, and also we have come across Sri Lankan garments have some sort of a label. So those can be to some extent, but we have to be very careful about greenwashing. The people may have some sort of voluntary labeling, but at the same time, inside they may be practicing something else. Moving on to the next slide, it's about corporate reporting, because People, the companies especially, do the corporate disclosures, CSR reporting, etc. And also we have different other ones like International Integrated Reporting Framework, GRI, ISO 26000, UN Global Compact, Dow Jones Sustainability Indices, a lot of indices, and then the UN Principles on Financial Institutions. But at the same time, if we can encourage people to go for green reporting in Sri Lanka, advocated by Ministry of Environment, then we can see as to how they embark on sustainability aspect, energy humility or energy efficiency aspects. National Productivity Awards anyway have certain points allocated for energy efficiency moves. So promoting those really will indirectly improve energy performance of these organizations. And of course, we have National Energy Efficiency Awards. We should be proud SLEMA started these some time ago. And then now, of course, the Sustainable Energy Authority is continuing. But those are some of the important things that can really help. Moving on to the next slide is on advertising. Of course, TVs, radios, etc., etc. What really matters is the truth in advertising. We should have some sort of truth in advertising, not misleading the people. Fair trading aspects has to be improved. Protection, consumer protection has to be improved. And the laws will have to be not prohibiting. Now, for example, having an advertisement for noodles with a mosquito coils smoke is really bad, which is really a real advertisement. So some sort of misleading things should be avoided, and same with energy sector. So our question is, can't we really use advertising for promoting sustainable consumption? Of course, who is going to pay for it is a question, but that. And then what is happening in Sri Lanka? We have sustainable public procurement guidelines. It was famous procurement guideline, government procurement was described in the Blue Book of the year 2005, but now we have 2018 procurement manual. The chapter 15 is entirely on green public procurement, which is on sustainable consumption aspect. Because government is the largest consumer in Sri Lanka. About 3 years ago, 23% of gross domestic product was public procurement. It's very huge. About 1/4 of the whole GDP was public procurement in Sri Lanka some time ago. So governments really can be very influential. Sustainable Energy Authority or other organizations can demonstrate and be examples of sustainable consumption. Whereas the green procurement will emphasize on environmental aspects. Moving on to the next slide on consumer behavior. As energy people, we are interested about energy economics. And then how about the price? The elasticities of demand on price and income elasticity and price elasticity of demand, energy. That is something we have to think of as to how the consumers will behave. And we saw in Dr. Siambala Pitti's article in the last SLEMA journal as to how the low-end consumers are demanding for more. That's a very clear example as to how the consumer behavior is when it comes to the price and income. So that is something that we should conscious about as energy professionals. And the people will have their own personal biases. They may not behave rationally. And that is why SLEMA is promoting rational use of energy. And these can come with habits, customs, brand loyalties, etc. And particularly peers, the pressures from the peers. He is doing, she is doing, why not I, some sort of thing. Young people are generally good for sustainable consumption as per research. So young people can be targeted, although people like me, old people may not respond that effectively in general. So when it comes to purchasing, of course, from the OECD examples, most of the purchasing decisions are made by the women, whereas as far as cost, expenses are concerned, it is mainly the men who are spending. So we may have to target, all the numbers are large in women, we may have to target the minds of the men when it comes to energy appliances and decisions, because it's mainly the cars, electronics, electricals, etc. are the decisions of the males overall in OECD. Moving on to the next slide, UN Consumer Protection Guidelines are released, and they are in the objective, general principles, guidelines, everywhere they talk about sustainable consumption. And then also they encourage research, government practices, especially life cycle thinking, eco products, and regulatory mechanism, etc. And towards finally, what is the energy discourse, energy policy discourse in Sri Lanka? We have the National Policy on Sustainable Consumption and Production as a draft. It is yet to be approved by the, I heard that it was approved by the cabinet, but it is not gazetted. We should check with Mr. Senanayake. And then in August last year, the National Energy Policy and Strategies were gazetted. But of course, it doesn't touch that much on energy humility aspects. Probably, as Dr. Tilak used to say, we can have satellite policies, and then we possibly can have under renewable energy or sustainable energy, some sort of a satellite policy or a concept note or a policy brief related to energy humility as well. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to the next slide. In conclusion, coronavirus crisis would recede. We are expecting it to recede. Sri Lanka is trying to getting back to normal. And then the leaders' decision will affect the future world. The leaders are influenced by people like you and me. Leaders are influenced by the bureaucrat, the policy implementers. Leaders are influenced by the policy influencers from whom they advise, whom they believe. And then as energy professionals, luckily we are trying to establish a networking team. We should have very good network access and links with the people who would influence the decision makers, because bureaucrats will implement the decisions, but there are other categories of people who can influence the policymakers. So one of the categories for SLEMA under the networking group is that, as far as I'm concerned. So choices, one of the choice the government has, the country has to continue the carbonized energy, continue the economic development through the carbonized energy, or are we going for a leapfrog, a jump start, with the jump start, the leapfrog, jump, leaving all the polluting technologies and go to, with experience, go to a secure and prosperous future. So countries embracing on renewable energy and energy efficiency has to inject investments to economics, at the same time protect the health and welfare of the people. And that is how we can maintain healthy and happy people. So sustainable consumption should go for sustainable energy transition, and energy humility and sustainable consumption would reduce the demand and exploitation of natural resources. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our duty to leave a life for the future generations. So let us act very responsibly. With that, I and Mr. Senanayake's presentation comes to an end. With this note, every end is a new beginning. And end of this presentation should be a new beginning. End of coronavirus crisis should be a new beginning towards betterment. I'm sorry about taking 20 minutes extra with the challenges we faced. Thank you very, very much indeed. So with that, the presentation comes to an end. I and Mr. Senanayake would like to clarify if you have anything, or we can go for a discussion, answer questions if you have, whatever. Did you hear me? Hello?
You are very clear, Mr. Namiz.
Okay.
Yeah, you all have exactly 20 minutes for the Q&A session. For any clarifications, please raise any questions or any.
By the way, has Mr. Senanayake got anything to contribute, if he likes?
Namiz, thank you very much. I think first of all, I should thank you for your effort in putting this nice presentation. I think you have covered everything. Let's see whether the audience they have with any clarification required or questions. Then we will try to respond. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, anything we would like to discuss? Anything that you don't agree with?
Yes, of course. This is Harsha Vikramasinghe. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you happy with the way things are done here in Sri Lanka, especially referring to my organization, Sustainable Energy Authority? Or is there anything that we should do more? What is your frank opinion? I will not be offended. You can be yourself explaining it to the rest of the people who are here.
I'm very happy about what is happening at Sustainable Energy Authority. You have done a lot of things. from the energy conservation fund time, and then you have very good programs for energy efficiency and renewable energy. Of course, we understand that you also have certain challenges when it comes to the national grid, but at the same time, we also see a lot of potential within SCA. And then if we can remove any red tapes or bureaucracies and get the things implemented faster, it will be really fine. Because some of the aspects that was displayed today under SCA list were started about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and still we are seeing them being implemented. Of course, challenges are there. And then you also have very good international networks. So we think that you really can be fast, do the right thing and do them fast. So that way, with regard to SCA speed, I'm not happy personally, but I think SCA is going in the right path. But moving as an organization who led the energy policy aspects, I think towards the national policy from the electrification perspective, we are going in some sort of right direction. But I would rather like what Dr. Tilak used to say some time ago about the satellite policies to strengthen the main policy. So that is an area where we can see certain aspects of renewable energies coming in, and particularly non-electricity energy aspects. Because very recently, I also noticed that when it comes to the energy balance even, the energy aspects that are not reflected in energy balance. Of course, there are practical challenges, but the energy aspects, even biomass, we do some sort of estimation. But apart from biomass, there are a lot of energy in the agricultural sector, for example. And then the solar energy, the direct thermal applications, it's very difficult to measure and count and account, but at the same time, they are huge. So those are some of the areas where SCA can go. And then I believe, Mr. Harsha, that with regard to energy humility and energy consumption, a better role can be played by SCA. Because generally, when it comes to the energy professionals or engineers, people would expect generating more and more and more, because that is their job. Their job is to provide energy at the least cost. Whatever means, I'm not talking about what renewable or non-renewable, but generally energy engineers are expected to generate more efficiently. But at the same time, in addition to that, there is nothing wrong in training the people to consume less. Now, promoting energy conservation is nothing wrong for SCA, although SCA mainly talks about renewable energy and energy efficiency. Conserving is not wrong. Energy saving or energy storing is not wrong. And promoting energy humility is not wrong. So I think that there should be some sort of things. Those are human behavioral aspects, sociological aspects. That's why I thought that this is not that technical at the time when we discuss about the topic. But those can really contribute, because the other people may not take interest. And if they take interest, they may go in wrong directions also, because they don't understand the practicalities as the energy professionals do. And mind you, so our SLEMA has not only engineers, there are other professionals who are energy enthusiasts and who are really contributing significantly to the energy sector. And we should really capitalize on them, energy economists or energy sociologists or other people like that as well. So that's how I see for SCA. It has a big scope, and it also contributes a lot. So I can't criticize at all. It does a lot of things, but at the same time, it has a lot of potential.
Thank you, Namiz, for the comprehensive answer. The floor is open for others to raise questions, if any.
Harsha, can I add to what Namiz said?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I see this as an opportunity. What has happened with the COVID outbreak, it is, of course, we have lots of challenges, problems, but it's an opportunity for us to think differently. Now, you wanted, for us to suggest something, a new direction for SCA. I think all these years we have been fighting a battle alone. We have been trying to promote all these energy efficiency, conservation, renewable energy. It's a battle, lonely battle. Now with this, people have realized, they are realizing that it is a must. Yeah. And also, I think this is the time for you to broad base the energy, the energy part of it to sustainable consumption as a whole. Now take for instance this event what we have today. Of course, we had a lot of problems, technical problems at the beginning, but that's quite normal. But if you are to have say a session like this in a normal situation, just imagine the resource we consume. Yeah. So now we have the same kind of the session with, I think, maybe not even 1/10 of the resource consumption we used to have. So this is how I think we should look at the future. This SCA also should be looking at digitalization your operation. Yeah. Now the transport, take for instance transport. It is very well, it goes with the sustainable consumption and production. The concept in the transport. This is the avoidance. We don't need to move now. We are carrying on. I think most of us do our regular working by being at home. Yeah? So these are the new things I think you need to think of. Like, I mean, we used to go around the country and having seminars and all that. Now we don't need to that, because now everyone is getting used to this kind of things. Everyone is using this Zoom and all these things, the education sector, health sector, even the inland revenue. They have, for the first time, they have allowed people to to make their payment through tax payment through online system. I think that is the area we should think of. So it is so energy. I think we should not take it as a in isolation, but in the resource consumption perspective. So that's how I would like to suggest for you to think of your new direction. Yeah. Thank you, Harsha.
Thank you, Mr. Senanayake. Any more questions to the two gentlemen who are well versed in these aspects?
Sad.
There's a question from Dr. Tilakshiamala here. If you can see the comments books.
Oh. Yeah, Dr. Tilak is asking.
Can I read it out?
Dr. Tilak is asking where specifically we think we can save more, display our humility. I think to some extent, Mr. Senanayake's answer earlier gives that, particularly on where we use. Now, one of the typical examples are himself itself, right? Dr. Siyambalapitiya, Dr. Lalita Siri Gunaruwan, and Mr. Upali Dharnagama. We call them energy efficiency Tunkattua, where having all the facilities, they used to use public transportation to come for work. Mr. Dharnagama came all the way from Vevaldeniya. Dr. Lalita Siri Gunaruwan used to come by push bicycle to the railway station with his wife on the bicycle bar, and then come for work by train. And Dr. Siyambalapitiya came all the way from Negombo using public transportation. That is an area where we have real life people from the Energy Managers Association membership itself who have demonstrated how the humility aspects are practiced, and they have done this for a long time. That is one way. And at the same time, As Mr. Senanayake says, going digital will reduce a lot of energy consumption. And at the same time, we have to use more and more energy efficient equipment, because in certain countries, when we analyze their GDP growth with energy, per capita energy consumption in industries or manufacturing center, very clearly there is a decoupling. Earlier, they were going together. There was a very positive correlation between energy use and GDP growth. And now we see a decoupling effect in energy consumption and GDP growth, even in India. So that is a clear indication of energy efficiency improvement. At the same time, similarly, energy humility aspects can reduce significant amount of demand for energy, because the life cycles are going to be sustainable consumption, for which they may, give up certain wants and meet only the needs. So that's why we say it is not Alpech aspect. It is improving quality of life and standard of living, but at the same time, reducing or not using what is not necessary. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. If no more questions, then we are going to wind up the session. And actually, on behalf of SLEMA, we extremely sorry for the technical failures we have experienced. And thank you very much for bearing with us by spending your valuable, much more time. And we have many more members forums in line to come. And we make sure similar failures won't happen in future events. And thank you very much for all your participation. And good night to you all. Thank you.
Thanks. It's Shamila Loshan and Rasika also for handling technical matters. And I really apologize for